Welcome to another episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Charles Bonanno.
Until 9/11, right? I was Tory on my license, and then 9/11 happened, and all the IDs, and I had to go to Salvatore. So now all my credit cards and everything say Salvatore. But up until 2001, my driver's license said Tory Bonanno.
Wow, that's crazy. So at 2001, why did they have to change it? Because of the
Because
9/11?
they started checking, right? People checked IDs after 9/11. I don't know
Yeah.
how old you are, but it all changed.
I was 21 when it happened.
Okay. So, you could pretty much go anywhere. The IDs, the whole system changed of identifying and verifying people after that. So was never a problem before that. After that, they would see the difference. Like on one of my documents, it would say Salvatore, and my license would say Tory. Well, we need these to match. We don't know how to deal with this. Like I'm telling you, it's just look at the last four letters. It's the same name. The middle name's the same, social security number's the same, but everybody was paranoid, especially, like 2002 and 3. Nobody wanted to be the one to let the whatever
person slip through the cracks, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And they weren't gonna be them, and it became a hassle. So I just put everything to Salvatore now. But it's still a hassle because this is a good story. I love telling this one. When I was born, my dad wasn't there at the hospital, so my mom was not happy about that. So it was St. Patrick's Day, 1963, and she decided to give me the middle name of Patrick on the birth certificate. So on my birth certificate, it says Salvatore Patrick Bonanno. And then he found out about it, of course, blew his mind. I was like, no, Frank, we ain't going to have an Irish name on this guy, right?
Yeah.
Not happening. So my social security card says Salvatore Anthony Bonanno. And my license says Salvatore Anthony Bonanno, but my birth certificate says Salvatore Patrick Bonanno. And they had that much pull that they could go down to the Social Security office and change it without the right documentation. So
yeah, that's pretty crazy.
I get clearance from the CIA as a result. So,
did you ever get to have an intricate conversation with your father or your grandfather about organized crime?
No, not directly, about organized crime. But I did talk to both of them about, their philosophies and, their businesses and, their, what they did in the past and what they wanted to do in the future. Yeah. They kept us at, it's a need to know basis. Right. So
yeah.
My grandfather always talked in parables or stories, right? He never everything was, it was just the way, his upbringing and everything was a story, and you had to figure out the moral of the story. And, he would get frustrated with a lot of us. When I say us, I mean my cousins and my brothers and sisters, because we wouldn't get it right away, and he would just, oh, you dumb Americans,
You say he would tell you a story. Can you give me an idea of like a reference of one? Like maybe if say he was telling you a story, what would the story be? Like,
oh, no. Yeah, they were way, I couldn't even begin to understand or be able to, recite one because they were always way over my head.
Like the intricacy of it, right?
Right, because he was, he'd be talking about Plato and he'd be talking about astronomy and navigation from the stars. And, with his broken English, he never really mastered English. It was hard to understand him, and you knew you were going to get quizzed about it, the story. So I would be so focused on the words that were coming out of his mouth and the facts that I was not able to see the big stories, the meanings. And it would frustrate the hell out of them, where my cousins and my brother and, they would pick up on it and, they could roll on the conversation. But my conversations with him were labored because, I was trying to understand I was looking at the trees and not seeing the forest type of thing.
Yeah. His broken English.
And that's what I remembered, most, but, and usually a lot of the stories, were the same about, having pride in your name, having pride in what you do, not half-assing things. if you commit to something, you're committed to it. They were big on that, and they were, big Catholics, serious Catholics, and took what the Pope said seriously, and what the church said, and we're good about going and making sure we went through all the the baptisms, the community, what do you call it, CCD, catechism is the word I was
Was he
thinking.
part of the Knights of Columbus?
He was part of the Knights of the Columbus. He was also a Knight
I
of
knew it.
Malta.
I
I
knew it.
became a Knight of Malta as well. After he passed. So heck yeah, they were. They took a lot of pride in the work they did with those charity organizations. So he didn't play it up at all, but yeah, they were. They did a lot of that.
Do you think that your grandfather had a hand at getting your father involved in the life of crime, or because you could have been involved in it just as easily as your father was?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say no. To answer your question, if I was, yes or no question, would be no. Of course, he did, raise them in the tradition. Now, they didn't see that as as a crime. They that was their old world tradition. They did, yes. So in that, if you ask the question that way, did he raise them in the old world ways as much as he could? Heck yeah. And he spoke Sicilian, right? And they spoke a dialect, the Castellammare dialect of Sicilian, right? So, I mean, just being able to speak that language, right? They didn't even teach us that language because when we were at home, they wanted us, English. They wanted us to have no accents, because they wanted us to go on to become, doctors and lawyers and project managers and teachers. And that's what my cousins and I and, my brothers, that's what we are, right?
They wanted you
That's why
far removed from that life.
right. That was the goal, right? Their
Yeah.
goal was to get out. They, they'd been looking over their shoulders because, it wasn't this big, glorious, romanticized thing that we see now in the Hollywood. There was, yeah, there were some good times, no doubt. But there was a lot of times where it was, looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next shoe to drop, waiting for an indictment, waiting for a jury verdict. I mean, that's no fun. Waiting for somebody to get out. That's not the fun part. Right?
Have you ever had parts of your life where you guys maybe you were with your dad or around him or his friends where you felt in fear of your life from other people, maybe getting out of prison or anything like that?
No, by the time, I got old enough to, start being aware of those kind of things, they had left New York, in the late 60s. Of course, they did some stuff there in the 70s. And then by the 80s, really, he was pretty, grandpa was most of the time, in Tucson or in California because we lived in San Jose, California, and they were, they had some businesses going there. So really from the mid 80s on, the only interactions we had were, we're going back there with my dad or with my uncle and, seeing the red carpet treatment that we got, and, you walk into Peter Luger's and, the crowds just part and you got the table right there. And, it's, yeah, you look at that and you go, wow, okay. So there's some juice still, of course. But no, I never feared that we were under any imminent danger from an attack. Now, feeling that the government's out to get you, yeah, absolutely. Seems like we were always having, they were always out to get, especially my father. They knew they couldn't get, Joe, so they really went after my dad and, my uncle Joe, my dad's younger brother. So
Yeah.
they were always in, involved in some sort of indictment or getting investigated in some way, shape, or form. And that's really what Grandpa spent all his money just fighting. He called it the Gestapo, the FBI. So
I'm surprised that they didn't try to clump him in with the commission case.
well, he was dead by the time well, he didn't die until 2002, but he was obviously not, involved in any activities because they didn't bust him for the commission stuff. They busted him because they were able to establish, the RICO laws and make sure that they were able to indict him that way. Well, he wasn't active in any of that stuff. I mean, he was 50 years ago, as he described in his book, but at the, in the 80s and 90s, there was nothing. Plus, they had him on the ropes. They were looking at him for other things, and my dad. So he wasn't one of the active guys in New York, and Giuliani couldn't cash in on the name. So, well, I guess that's probably not true. If they would have got Joe Bonanno even at